Hi, friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Mental Fitness Unscripted podcast, where our conversation will encourage your healthy living journey. Inspired by our Team Quadzilla coaching motto, healthy living starts between your ears, we talk about mental fitness in ways that challenge us to think about our thinking regarding topics like habits, leadership, exercise, values, marriage, parenting, and faith. Our hope with this podcast is to sharpen you as we sharpen ourselves to be all we were made to be. So let's dive right into the conversation on this episode of Mental Fitness Unscripted.
Cool. Well, you had something, this is going to be a total surprise. So Chad's going to throw something at me here. Here we go.
Yeah. This is a big test.
Uh-oh. I didn't know I had to study.
So no, I just love that. In fact, I was writing this morning how, well, our audience may not know this, but almost every time I will ask you, what is the big idea? And very often you defer to me as what is my big idea. And so we both have opportunity to come up with our big idea. And some of yours have been fantastic, and we've run those even for multiple episodes. So we're taking turns. But what's fun about that is the other person isn't ready. And so whatever conversation comes from it is very spontaneous because we have no preparation. And I think that's part of what makes what we do kind of fun. So anyway, the big thing I've been fussing with the last few days is there's two parts to it, but where I want to start is, where do ideas come from? And this occurred to me because sometimes I get some ideas. Some of them are a little bit out there. Some of them are very convicting. Some of them are like, quite honestly, dark and creepy. But I have ideas. And so I was thinking, well, where do ideas come from? And how do I know if this is an idea that I need to do something with versus cast away? And I just feel like having some kind of system to process that would be helpful. And I don't know that I have one, or maybe clearly I do, but I'm not actually aware of it. And, Atomic Habits will say that we operate in life virtually unaware of most of the things that happen to us and around us and how we make decisions. So I want to be more aware.
Right.
And so ideas in their processing, what do you think?
Well, forgive me for a second. I'm going to walk right over here.
Okay. I like how you can go to a different office and still have stuff on the shelf that fits with what we're getting ready to talk about.
So there's a book that many people are familiar with.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So while you were talking, it came to mind that Napoleon Hill actually covers this in Think and Grow Rich.
Okay.
He actually gives his thoughts as far as, where do ideas come from. But originally it was in his book, Law of Success, which is a monster.
Oh my.
But very good. And what Law of Success was it was a series. I think it was 20. I want to say it was 28. Maybe it was 21. I can't remember. I'm gonna look here really quick. Yeah. Anyway, this was done in little workbook size things, and They have since put it together in a large book. So
Okay.
there's lessons in here, and one of those is it's called imagination. And he talks about that there's two sources, and I have my own beliefs on a lot of this. Okay, he alludes to some of the beliefs that I had before I read these two books, and
Hmm.
anyway. So he talks about synthetic ideas and creative ideas. So let me give you an example of synthetic. The Wright brothers, they were successful at making an airplane operate, but they weren't the first ones. I mean, you can go back to Leonardo da Vinci and see that he drew up
Right.
things and so forth. And a lot of that idea and the Wright brothers, I'll tell you a little bit about the Wright brothers here in a second, but a lot of the idea is that Leonardo da Vinci or these others would look at birds and say, okay, why can they fly? Why can't I fly? Okay.
Hmm.
And so the idea comes from being curious, why can't I fly? But also the desire to fly. Uh, for whatever reason, probably back then it was like, well, they're flying. How come I can't? That looks really cool.
Yeah.
What would it be like to be at a height and look down? And so they started to look at the bird and say, okay, what causes that? And if you look back, a lot of the flying machines that were built had the flapping motion like a
Yes.
bird. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was the original idea. But now the Wright brothers come along and they have this static wing that didn't flap, right?
Hmm.
Okay. And where did they get that from? Well, what they did was they took the idea of the bird flying, they still used that, and I'll tell you how they did that. But they took the idea of flying a kite. The kite didn't flap, but it flew. Does that make sense? And
Yep.
so they put those two ideas together, and that's what Napoleon Hill called synthetic ideas.
Hmm.
Okay, you see something, and man, I know how to make that better. Okay,
Gotcha.
so
Yep.
so you know, like a weed whacker. We used to use those little squeeze
Oh
clippers.
yeah, yeah.
That look like
Yeah.
scissors.
Yes.
And after an hour and a half of that, your arm just falls off, and
Yeah, exactly.
okay,
And you've done 10 feet.
right. And so if somebody gets the idea, and I don't know where it came from, but they, a cord whipping around and having it feed on itself, so it just kind of built on itself where the original idea of scissors went away. Okay,
Hmm.
icebox to a refrigerator. So it's just that subsequent succession, and that's synthetic, where we
Okay.
improve and progress with the idea. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now back to the Wright brothers. So when they turn an airplane has flaps now that will move on the wing and adjust the wing or the airflow over the wing to turn the airplane. Okay. Well, the Wright brothers didn't have any flaps. What they did was they saw that the birds would actually flex their wing,
Mm.
and so they called it wing flexing. And so when they controlled the airplane originally, they flexed the wing. Okay, and that progressed, and in the 50s, they actually went from a flap on the back to the whole wing adjusting.
Mm. Okay.
Okay, they call it a flying wing. And anyway, so you can see that progression, the idea of the bird flapping. Well, no, let's do it like a kite. And the bird turning, well, no, let's do it this way. And well, that's so good. Let's have it go this way. And so it's just this progression of that synthetic idea of pulling things in from other places. Okay.
Gotcha.
That's synthetic ideas, according to Napoleon Hill. The other, it's creative ideas. Okay, it just comes out of nowhere. Boom, this idea. Okay, and if you look at a lot of the ideas that come around, most of them are synthetic. It's based on our experience. Well, how can I make
Yeah.
this better? And the drive to progress and make it better. Um, um, Growing up in I'm not going to date myself here, but growing up with cars, everybody was always tweaking and tuning, and now it's
Sure.
better because you can do it by computer, and so all this tweaking's going on. Computers. I'm updating my memory, and I'm always putting in a new, better chip because it processes. We're always just kind of tweaking. Okay. Um, so a creative idea will just come out of nowhere. Boom. And Thomas Edison was famous for this. The phonograph. I, it just came out of nowhere. And when he put it together, it was a hit. Originally, he used it was a bakel. Well, no, it was wax, but it was a cylinder instead of a record. Instead of a disc, it was a cylinder that would roll on a roller, and that's how it
Okay.
played. Okay. And so, that progression, it went to a wax record, and then they went to the Bakelite, and then, and it just starts, now we're at vinyl, all these guys collecting vinyl, and then we moved on to the cassette and the 8-track, and
Yeah, right.
now, what's funny is now we're coming clear back to the vinyl. So anyway,
Yeah, everybody wants, yeah, exactly.
how can I do this better? And so it's just that progression. But the phonograph was just out of nowhere. I mean, there was nothing like it, and he had this idea, put it together, and bam. Okay, so that's an example of a creative idea. And so you asked where the sources from that come. He also touches on that, and he's very, how do I put this? Um, I don't want to say non-religious because it has overtones of religion, but at the same time, it's non-sector. It's sectarian. Am I? He's not pointing to one religion.
Okay.
It's kind of like there's a higher power,
Okay.
and anyway, that's what he says creates the creative idea. It's just he calls it the ether. You call it the universe, but it's just out there floating. And if we tune ourselves, this is how he explains it. If we tune ourselves on a problem, we will get a creative idea if it doesn't exist. Or if it kind of exists and we're looking and we're observant, we may see things that we can put together that already exist, or we can improve upon it and have it fix that problem that we're concentrating on. So there's a long explanation. Napoleon Hill's, and I can hold with that. Where do these ideas come from? Here again, I am religious. I think a lot of the creative ideas, the original ideas, come from inspiration from God.
Yeah.
A higher power.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So
I was kind of hoping we would land there in some regard, because I very much agree that that as a creature made in the image of our Creator,
yep.
It stands to reason pretty easily for me that some of that creative energy would come from our Creator and inspire us to new things and whatnot. I also think that there's it's not a new idea, of course, but in scripture it says, as a man thinks, so he is. And so whatever it is that we're spending our mental energy thinking about is where I think some of these ideas are going to come from. So if you're in a dark place and you're thinking about dark things and negative things, then your ideas are going to follow that. And at the same time, as you just said, and Napoleon Hill said, that if we're fussing over a problem and we're thinking about that enough, somehow or another, other inputs or experiences or circumstances in our life will kind of conspire in our mind to help us solve problems and come up with ideas. So I think that's helpful to just kind of spit out and recognize, it's not mystical where ideas come from.
Yeah,
There's
no,
purpose and reason for them, and but then it still doesn't answer the question, well, then what do I do with these? How do I know if it's something that's worth my effort and energy, or it's absurd and needs to be left? Because to your point, if Bell had said to somebody, I have this idea for a phonograph, and they would be like, well, that's absurd, but yet it was still a really good idea. So how do we know when something is worth pursuing?
yeah, and I think that's part of the inspiration.
Mm,
I wish I knew what he was working on, where that inspiration came from, because I don't think he was just walking along and, oh, you know what? I'm just going to make this wax cylinder and it'll record
yeah,
sound. That'd be awesome. I'm not.
right.
I wonder if he had a problem of recording things, and man, I wish I could just pick up my recording device and just dictate it and so forth. I don't know if it was
Hmm.
that, or if he had a secretary that was taking shorthand and wondered, is there a way that we could make this easier for her or him? Um, I I don't know what he was working on, but
Right,
suddenly whatever it was, and you have to tune yourself. You have to be receptive for an idea. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. You've run into a problem, maybe on a house maintenance or something, and it's like, how do I solve this? And then pretty soon you've got this curiosity of looking for things. Well, I could use this thing, or suddenly an idea comes to you, and it's like, oh, I'll do it that way. We can get
Yeah.
inspiration from a lot of places. Um, we talked about my chocolate making. Well, I got inspired from a movie. Man, that looks interesting.
Yeah.
They're tempering this chocolate, and I thought that looks really cool. And
Mm,
it was more of the physics and the composition, the chemical composition of the chocolate that really intrigued me. I've kind of got a science brain here, but that intrigued me, that they had to be so careful and so precise with it. And that's something that I've always, I like precision. I like,
mm.
um, another hobby I'm about to jump into is making watches. So I,
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was just going to mention you had said that
I,
before. That's
I, I
pretty
have
precise.
I haven't done it yet, but I'm actually really excited about it. But those are things I really like doing. I can do gross carpentry, like framing a wall, and so I can do that. But I really enjoy doing the molding, where it has to
Mm,
join. I love doing those precise cuts and getting it. I enjoy that piece of it, and so I'm always tweaking. How can I do this? And back to the chocolate, I actually learned some things outside of me, but as I'm doing it, I'm finding that I have my own nuance to add to it
mm.
that's very different than other people. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
we don't always do things the same way. Is my way better? I don't know. It's better for me, but somebody may take inspiration from that for something that they're looking for. Who knows? But
Yeah.
so back to your question, what do we do with it? We get these ideas all the time. I'm kind of funny. I actually write my ideas down because I feel like that's a gratitude for the idea.
Ooh, I
Okay.
like that. Because how many times do I forget my ideas?
That's what I'm saying. Okay. And so
Yeah.
if I want the universe or the higher power or God to give me more, I've got to show that I respect that idea came. And
Mm,
by doing that, I have to remember it. Second thing, this is where faith comes in, and people can take this and say, well, now we're going religious. Take it the direction you want. I believe it's an eternal principle, whether you believe in God or not. We are operating in faith all the time, whether it's positive or negative. Okay.
agreed.
You have some sort, some people call it motivation, desire. It's got a variety of names, and I believe in all of those things on top of faith too. And we can go down that road another time, but faith is always operating. Okay. If I turn on a light switch, I expect the light to come on, and when it doesn't, I question, well, what's happened? Did I forget to make my payment, or
Mm.
did the power station go down? Somebody hit a power pole with their car? What happened? Did I blow a fuse? And so we expect that light to come on, and when it doesn't, we react to it. And so faith is operating all the time. The fact that I go out to my garage and look at the breakers to make sure that I didn't blow a breaker, or, I go out and look at the meter. Did the company shut me off? Do I need to make a phone call? And, faith is there. We're always operating on it. And it's what we're looking for. What do I have faith in? If I don't have trust and faith in people, I will find that. And those ideas will come, and it will
Yeah.
support my thinking. It's always in operation. And so, to answer your question, what do I do with a thought or an idea that comes to me? I've got to write it down, and then I have to make a determination. Is this something that fills what I'm looking for as part of my mission to put together, or is it something I can put aside and maybe do later? However, I personally, I believe I've got to write it down and be grateful for the idea, because I have to honor that it was given to me.
Mm.
I
Yeah, that's good.
I look at it as a gift.
No, I like that. That's good because there's a couple of things I really like about that. First is you're acknowledging it as um, something that has been brought to your awareness, so it shouldn't be ignored necessarily, and it deserves some contemplation. But that contemplation also needs some direction, and so I like what you're saying there about. I like to think of it as running it through a filter.
Mm-hmm.
Does this idea align with um, my values and convictions, or who I'm aiming to be, or is it a distraction? Well, how do I know? Well, if I'm running it through these filters of, or I really like this filter that's found in the Bible. It's Philippians 4:8, and that verse says basically, think about things that are good and right and true, excellent, lovely, praiseworthy. These are the things that we should be thinking about. So
Right.
does this idea align with that type of mentality, and let that help me decide what action do I take from it there. So yeah, I think this is a curious exercise. And again, some people are like, you guys think too hard. It's too much.
It's just a
And
great idea.
yeah, I mean, leave it alone. But what I'm fighting against is this feeling that I get very often, and I see it all around me, is that we are just running on a hamster wheel to nowhere. and we're full of busyness and stress and to-dos, and I don't have enough time and blah, blah, blah. But we're not even thinking about what we're doing or why we're doing it. And so I just thought that while I had some idea, is like, okay, well, what does this even mean that I have an idea? And what am I supposed to do with that? So I think this was a fruitful conversation just to lay out there that, ideas come from somewhere.
They do.
And it's reasonable. It's not some mystical thing that, just happens. And that there are things that we can do, choices to be made in what happens with that idea next. And so, yeah, thank you for those insights.
I think you've touched on something really critical in processing those ideas. Writing them down for me is part of that filtering process. And I love that you used the I'll call it a metaphor of a filter. You have to establish what that filter is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a conscious effort. And the more that you establish that filter, the better the filtering process will be. And you won't, it will limit your overwhelm of all these ideas coming. It will also filter out the ones that you've set your standards. And I think there's a two process. I think there's two filters. Number one is there's a standard of living. Okay, this is how I live, and anything counter to that, I'm not going to let in.
Yeah.
Okay, hey, I need to go next door and rob a bank or whatever. Okay, well, that may be an idea. Am I going to write it down and be grateful for it? No, I'm going to look at it and say, man.
Yeah, exactly.
And so a little sideline here, I think there's another source of ideas too, and it's not a good one. Okay.
Yes.
Opposites are there, and they have to be there. You've got to have the good with the bad, because you won't know good unless you know bad. Okay.
Yes.
They have to be in place. And so if there's a God, there's a devil. If there's a higher power, there's a lower power. So there is a source of wrong. And that's why you have to establish that first filter of, here's my standard of living. Okay, these are the things that I live by.
Yeah.
You can call it a moral compass, whatever you want to call it. Okay. You've got to have that filter. And then the other filter that you've got to add on to that, let's call it a micron filter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
The other thing you've got to add on there is what's my life's mission right now? Okay. And you talked about distraction. I still write down good ideas because they may show up again later and be useful later as my mission changes. Okay.
Yes.
So if it makes it through the first filter, I may hang on to it and put it in a repository of some kind. But then I'm going to put it through my other micron filter, if you will, and say, okay, does this apply now? Or is that just a really cool idea I need to shelf for some other time?
Fabulous.
Does that make sense?
I love that. Yeah, it does. I love it. You're right on. I mean, the two filters is very necessary.
And that's how we make it conscious of what we do with it.
Yeah.
Okay, is taking that time out and saying, okay, here's my standard of living. I'm not going to let anything else pass that. And here's what I'm doing right now, my life's mission at this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. There, we just solved a major problem today.
Well, we solved it. Now it's the application.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do now, here's my big idea, is I'm going to sell those filters to people.
Oh, well, there you go. We ought to manufacture those and sell them.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Well, if anybody needs that, call Chad, Coach Chad.
Yeah.
All right. 2-minute warning.
All right. Fantastic.
Did we cover what you wanted to cover?
Yeah, we did. That was good. I just think, if nothing else, my aim is to increase awareness, and for this seemingly simple idea about ideas, and to think about that. Think about our thinking is the aim here. So I think we crushed that today. This was really good.
Yeah. Another thing that he adds in imagination, he said, if you do get something from the source, look at the source. Is it credible?
Yeah.
And we've already talked about the filter, and that's great. But if you get an idea from like social media, or man, look behind the curtain and say, okay, is this for real? I think too often, and what inspired me to talk about this is, as you said, think about our thinking, and I really think that's what we've got to do.
Yeah.
Man, that looks good, but until you pull the curtain back, stay curious.
Exactly. Stay curious. Love it.
Stay curious.
All right, sir. Excellent stuff today.
Always good to meet with you. Thank you, Chad. Thank you.